Hi, welcome to our webinar, Building Healthy Economies Through Healthy Communities. I'm Sydney Daigle, the Heal Cities and Towns Campaign Manager at the Institute for Public Health Innovation. Today, we're excited to share some research and examples of how healthy eating and active living policies and practices can be used to advance your municipality's economic development goals. I'm joined today for this webinar by our three speakers. Pete Eshelman is the Director of Outdoor Branding at Roanoke Regional Partnership in Roanoke, Virginia. Micah is the Director of Economic Development with the City of Stockton, California. And Jenny Willoughby is the Sustainability Manager with the Department of Public Works in the City of Frederick, Maryland. If you have a question for me or any of our speakers, please type it into the question box during the webinar. All attendees are in listen-only mode. Your question will go to our webinar organizers, and we'll share it with the right speaker, and we will answer it during our Q&A session at the end of our webinar today. Today's webinar is hosted by the Institute for Public Health Innovation, or IPHI. IPHI creates partnerships across sectors and cultivates innovative solutions that improve the health and well-being of all individuals in Maryland, Virginia, and the District of Columbia. In particular, we focus on those communities most affected by health inequities. IPHI is one of more than 40 public health institutes in the country. Public health institutes work in conjunction with the public and private partners to protect and improve the public's health. We add capacity for a range of functions, from workforce training to program development to research and evaluation. Our central office is in DC, and we have a satellite office in Richmond, Virginia. We have employees located across the Mid-Atlantic region, and we work closely with our community partners in the field. At IPHI, we work to enhance the environments and conditions in which people live, age, work, learn, pray, and play. We strengthen health service systems and public policy, and we work to build organizational and community capacity to sustain progress and change. The Heal Cities and Towns campaign for the Mid-Atlantic is a project of the Institute for Public Health Innovation, funded by our founding partner, Kaiser Permanente. The campaign has been an IPHI project since 2012, and to date we have 58 Heal Cities and Towns across Virginia and Maryland who have joined. We work closely with our strategic partners, the Virginia and Maryland Municipal Leagues, to reach additional towns and provide technical assistance to our existing members. There are also Heal Cities and Towns campaigns in other states in the country. In Colorado, the campaign is run by LiveWell Colorado. Public Health Advocates runs California's campaign. And finally, Oregon's campaign is run by the Oregon Public Health Institute. Our campaign offers technical assistance to local government leaders in Maryland and Virginia interested in implementing municipal policies and practices that promote HEAL, or healthy eating, active living, in their communities. The work of the Heal Cities and Towns campaign has three focus areas. The first is healthy food access, and this could take the form of healthier vending machines in cities and towns, encouraging farmers markets, and starting community gardens. Physical activity is next. Cities and towns have incentivized mixed use and transit-oriented development, increased the open space in their jurisdiction, and helped to write up joint use agreements for school facilities to operate after hours. And finally, workplace wellness. This can include requiring regular physical activity breaks during your longer meetings, implementing stronger nutrition standards for food served in municipal dining facilities, and finally, ensuring facilities accommodate breastfeeding for new moms. These are just a few examples of the many HEAL strategies that we see implemented across our region. We have a few themes that cut across all three of these areas, including a commitment to equity and sound economic development, and we'll be talking quite a bit about that commitment to sound economic development during today's webinar. Our campaign staff help municipalities examine their communities through a health lens and identify specific evidence-based policies and practices that can help them address their healthy eating and active living goals. We then provide technical assistance to help cities and towns successfully implement their HEAL policies and practices, which can range from one-on-one consultations to presentations at city council meetings and work sessions, to fact sheets, model policies, and policy assessments, to trainings and webinars like ours that we're having today. And finally, we like to regularly recognize and celebrate the accomplishments of our Heal Cities and Towns at our annual Municipal League events and through our newsletter, website, and social media channels. So as I mentioned, in addition to our 3 focus areas, healthy food access, physical activity, and workplace wellness, we also provide technical assistance on those critical cross-cutting approaches like equity and sound economic development. We've listed some of the resources that we create to support cities and towns interested in using HEAL, Healthy Eating, Active Living, to address their economic development goals on this slide, and we hope that you'll check them out on our website. At the top, we have our fact sheet on the economic benefits of HEAL that provides a great overview of the strategies your municipality can use to advance your economic development goals and some valuable talking points. If you're interested in the sources for those strategies in the fact sheet or those that we share today, I encourage you to check out our resource sheet on healthy eating, active living, and economic development, which really helps you if you're interested in doing a deep dive into one issue area. We also have 2 case studies on our website on how the cities of Roanoke, Virginia, and Frederick, Maryland have used HEAL to build a stronger local economy, and I'm sure you'll want to read those after hearing from Pete and Ginny a little bit later on in our presentation. And finally, we have a longer form article from the Virginia Town and City magazine titled "What Does a Body and an Economy Good?" that's available in its entirety through our website. All of these can be accessed through the website, as I mentioned several times. We really hope you'll visit it, and we have a link provided on the bottom right corner of this slide. All right, so let's get into the topic for today. Increasingly, municipal leaders are using HEAL, Healthy Eating, Active Living, policies and practices to improve the health and quality of life for their residents. While they may recognize HEAL's connection to improving the health of their residents, many municipal leaders may not be aware that HEAL policies and practices can also help build and sustain the health of their local economy. Developing an understanding of the ways HEAL policies contribute to a city's or town's economic development can help local leaders generate support for their HEAL initiatives, and it can help them expand their toolbox of strategies to grow and sustain their community's economy. Over the next few slides, I'll cover what some of these HEAL strategies can look like in each of our focus areas. In addition to improving the diets of residents, we know healthy eating policies and practices can provide a powerful stimulus to the local economy. For example, grocery stores often serve as anchors that attract additional businesses and communities. We know that for every 10,000 square feet of retail grocery space that opens, an estimated 24 new jobs are created. Grocery stores can further boost the local economy if they choose to procure products grown by local farmers. This supports the local agricultural economy and the additional businesses that form the supply chain that takes food from the farm to the store. Farmers markets also stimulate the local economy and boost farmers and small businesses' bottom lines. For every $100 spent at a local farmers market, an estimated $62 stays and circulates in the local economy. Further, when farmers markets accept federal food and nutrition assistance benefits like SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly known as food stamps, and the Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, WIC, the aggregate purchasing power of families and residents with lower incomes is increased, and in turn, more money is on the table for local farmers. So growing food is not just limited to traditional farms. Families that eat the food they grow in community gardens and on urban farms have more disposable income that they can spend locally and benefit area businesses. For every $1 invested in a community garden plot, around $6 worth of produce is yielded. We know that community gardens can yield between $500 and $2,000 worth of produce annually per family, which I would say is a pretty good investment. They also increase the property values of nearby homes, and that in turn generates additional property tax revenue for local governments. In addition to providing valuable green space for residents in urban communities, urban farms are often used to provide job training for new farmers or for folks interested in starting a food business. Urban farms also can act as business incubators to new entrepreneurs, which is often a highly sought after service in smaller and medium-sized municipalities. Finally, we know urban farms can create both on-farm jobs and provide supplemental income to local residents. Next, active living. Creating communities where residential uses are combined with civic, so government, and commercial business uses that are safe and accessible to pedestrians and bicyclists can increase property values and tax revenues. We know that home buyers will pay more for houses that are in more walkable and bikeable areas. Measures that ensure the safety of walkers and bikers, like slowing down and calming traffic in pedestrian-friendly areas, can also encourage foot traffic and bike traffic to locally owned businesses. We all know that parks can also create great recreational opportunities for residents, but many cities and towns are now using their parks as a tool to increase tourism. Further, we know that if a park is seen as safe and it's well maintained, people will pay more to rent or purchase a home near it. Our final focus area is workplace wellness. Promoting healthy eating and active living within your municipal workplace is a great investment. Employers save on average $6 for every dollar they spend on wellness programs, and this includes savings from a decrease in medical costs and reduced absenteeism. In addition, workplace wellness programs can increase productivity, boost morale, and reduce costly turnover among staff. Remarkably, in organizations of all sizes, health promotion programs have been found to reduce sick leave, health plan costs, and worker comp and disability costs by 25%. Not surprisingly, communities that are pedestrian and bicycle friendly, have a thriving economy, and a healthy local food environment are often seen as high value places and areas to live. When cities and towns work to bring these amenities to their communities, there's a risk of displacing long-term residents, including residents with lower incomes and older adults on a fixed income because of the increase in rents and property taxes that we discussed a little bit earlier. Rising housing prices also made these communities unattainable for low and moderate income families looking to move into a livable and healthy community. There are several strategies that cities and towns can use to prevent displacement of long-term residents and ensure that residents of all incomes can benefit from a city or town's health improvements and economic growth. These can include adopting policies to preserve and create affordable housing, including exploring rent control policies, foreclosure prevention, and housing rehab programs for existing residents, increasing individuals' assets through home ownership programs, job creation, and livable wage provisions, minimizing the tax burden on older, lower-income property owners, integrating an equity framework into your comprehensive plans and other city and town planning documents. This can provide guidance when city or town improvements may affect vulnerable populations like low-income residents, people with disabilities, and the older adult community. And finally, we encourage you to engage community members in your development and planning processes to hear community concerns. This can both help prevent unintended consequences and ensure that new developments are truly responsive to the full community's needs and desires. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our guest speakers. They will tell you a little bit more about their home cities and towns and describe the economic impact of their healthy eating and active living activities. All of our speakers today are from Heel cities and towns. Roanoke and Frederick are both in our Mid-Atlantic region, and Stockton is part of the California Heel Cities and Towns campaign. Again, we will be happy to answer your questions after all the presentations by our guest speakers, and you can type those into the question box as they occur to you, and we'll answer them during the final segment of the webinar. Now I'll turn it over to Pete, the Director of Outdoor Branding from the Roanoke Regional Partnership.
I'm here. I'm waiting for the slides to come over to me. Let's see here.
So Pete, I'll just go ahead and go to your first slide, and hopefully those slide controls will transfer over shortly.
Okay. Sounds good. I appreciate everybody hopping on this. You know, they only give me about 10 minutes to attempt to convey our initiative, so I'm going to do my best, but know that you can reach out to me at any time, and I can provide more specifics on the few things that I touch at a 30,000-foot level. I'm with the Regional Economic Development Organization, and we represent 8 local governments and about 120 private businesses. And about 8 years ago, our organization took a step back and we reevaluated our approach to economic development. We wanted to make sure we weren't doing business the same way we had been for the previous 30 years. We wanted to make sure we were progressive in our nature and approach to it, and we're changing with the times. And there were many outcomes that came out of that self-evaluation, but the one that I'm involved with focuses on livability and image building. And more specifically, my focus is on taking our natural assets, our lakes, our rivers, our mountains, our trails, and leveraging them to attract investment and talent to the Roanoke, Virginia region. You want to hit my next slide, Sydney, if it doesn't go? There we go, cool. So we took the outdoor recreation assets of our area, you know, that were really just being treated as wallpaper, nice to look at, but not being nurtured or developed, and we made an intentional effort to change our community narrative to one that places a strong emphasis on, you know, the healthy, active living. And it's not that Roanoke had a bad image, you know, it's just that we didn't have an image. There are probably people on this call who 10 years ago had never really heard of Roanoke, even if they do today. I know that 8 years ago I would attend conferences, and one of those few people who had heard of Roanoke had it all wrong. They thought we were that lost island off the coast of North Carolina or a suburb of Washington, D.C. But that has changed, and now we're really known as a newly discovered, you know, mountain community with an awesome, you know, metro vibe. And the past 4 years, we've been voted best outdoor town by readers of Blue Ridge Outdoors magazine, which, if you aren't familiar with, is a monthly outdoor recreation publication that serves the southeast part of the United States, from Maryland down to Georgia. So, you know, how did we get to this point where we're receiving these accolades? The answer is complex, but I think the simplest way to explain is that we put a lot of energy into turning our residents into our ambassadors, into our community cheerleaders who are telling that same collective story. So we planted a lot of seeds over the past several years, and I'm pretty sure I've given presentations to every Kiwanis, Rotary, Cosmopolitan, Garden Club, City Council, Bike Club, you know, throughout the entire region. You kind of get the idea. We do a lot of talks, and I refer to them as seed planting. And it's in these talks that we plant those seeds on on how and why the outdoors. You know, we then water them, nurture them, and watch these ideas take root and grow, because as an organization, we don't own or control anything. You know, what we're able to do is really be thought leaders and connectors, and so connect ideas to the resources to help make them happen. So our goal has been to create a climate that increases awareness of the benefits of the outdoors and the associated active lifestyle, and creates opportunity, you know, for economic development. By turning our residents into community cheerleaders, and by developing, you know, key brand building events. So these are the steps that we loosely use to build our outdoor brand and shape our community narrative. But as my director likes to remind me and tell me, you know, we're building the plane as we fly it, so it's a loose, you know, blueprint that we're following. The first step was to inventory all of our outdoor assets. So we did what everyone else, you know, does today, and we built a website. And you know, it took us pretty much a full year to, you know, build the website. And on it, we wanted to make it a community resource, a place that makes it easy for a person to connect with the outdoors, whether it's to find a new hiking trail, you know, figure out where to rent kayaks, or find a group of people to trail run with. You know, if it touches the outdoors, you know, you're going to find it on this website. And we know that people do their research online, so we position the website to provide the answers that they're looking for. And we support it with a lot of geographic and behavioral search engine marketing. The second step was to identify gaps. And what I mean by that is to find out what's working, what isn't, what's missing, what opportunities exist. You know, basically, how do we become a better outdoor community for our residents? And that's our focus, is to focus on our residents first. So one of our goals was to make the outdoors more accessible and more user-friendly. You know, we want to make it easy for people to get outside and take away their excuses, you know, for why they're not doing that. So an example beyond providing just your basic maps and directions, which I think we take for granted, it's a given that that's the first thing people need. But beyond that is we work with hotel staff to prepare them to answer questions. When a guest comes up and says where can I go for a hike or where can I rent a bike, and we've also worked to simplify how people pay for trail access fees at certain areas that require them, make it more user friendly. We saw that we didn't have any brand building outdoor events that would attract people from outside of our region. So we set out to create a few. We had all kinds of events that would that were great for people within the region, but we wanted to have some kind of brand building events that would give people from outside of the region a reason to come, experience our community, and then walk away with a better understanding of what Roanoke represents. So one of our first events we created was America's Toughest Road Marathon, which has attracted people from all 50 states and 10 countries. It's had a direct economic impact of $3.7 million. And it also really helps with our image building. So if you're flying on Delta Airlines in October and you pick up the Sky magazine, you'll see our little boutique marathon mentioned in the October issue of Delta Sky magazine, as well as a September issue or October issue of Runner's World. So a lot of free publicity. So from an image building, so we have an image building, we have a tourism impact, and then we have a community impact as well. Our community has really rallied around that event and gotten involved, and so now we have all kinds of couch to 5K, training programs, half marathon training programs, full marathon training programs. We also, one that we're particularly proud of and has also won some awards, we've created what we call the Go Outside Festival, which is a free festival that attracted 30,000 people last fall and serves as a means to connect people with lifetime outdoor activity. The festival, it's free to attend because we do not want cost to be a barrier to entry, because part of our goals is to introduce underserved areas within our community to the outdoor lifestyle. So we have pro athlete shows to inspire people, competitive races, music, camping, but the biggest component of the festival is the ability for a person to try out a mountain bike, learn to stand up paddleboard, learn to fly fish, try rock climbing, or participate in a few of the more than 100 free workshops and clinics that take place that weekend. We've gone on to help implement a bike share program that launched this past spring and is already expanding later this month with 3 more stations. We've crowdfunded through private donations, put in access points to the Roanoke River. So, excuse me, I'll take a drink of water. But we crowdfunded this money through donations of $50 to $100, from our residents, and that's just really our residents stepping up to put their money into infrastructure improvements that they want to see and that they need to see. And so we created a privately built put-in, and we handed it over to the city, and now it's a city parks that they maintain. So in a nutshell, we're focused on infrastructure improvements that really make living the outdoor lifestyle easy. But the bulk of our time is really spent on turning our residents into our ambassadors, our advocates, or as I said earlier, our community cheerleaders. We've been educating our residents on what's right here in their own backyards, connecting them with clubs and guides that will help them get outside, events to keep them engaged, really just giving them the tools and resources to make living an outdoor lifestyle easy. So our website is one of the biggest tools that helps us reach our residents. But a close second is our weekly Get Outside newsletter. And I'm sure many people on this call put out newsletters, and they know how much of a pain it can be to put them together. And I honestly wish I'd never started ours in the first place, but it's something that people cite to me time after time as a great resource. So every week we put out a newsletter that highlights what's happening outside that weekend, as well as kind of 4 different stories, such as highlighting a trail and an advocacy issue or general tips on living a greener life. And again, it's really just set to educate our residents on really how to live that healthy, active lifestyle. So this constant and consistent education of our residents connects them with everything taking place in and around the region. And our goal is that they carry this message forward and that we've really got a lot going on here within our community. So by turning our residents into our cheerleaders and by developing key brand building events and by working to create better access to the outdoors, we've been able to give our community an identity and thus put Roanoke on the map, and it's that one of a really strong kind of emerging outdoor recreation mecca. So some of the results of our concerted efforts have been a very engaged community, both on the public and private side. Our community narrative is shared across local governments, private businesses, and individuals. The outdoors is something that our community now realizes is not only a strength, but it is something that differentiates our community from others. Across the board, people realize that rivers and trails are much more than just water and dirt. They have true economic impact. So since 2010, we've seen a 38% increase in outdoor industry employment in the Roanoke region, whereas the same sector only grew 3.9% on the state level and 14.5% nationally. One of our focuses is to attract businesses that are directly tied to the outdoor industry, and so far we've seen 13 new outdoor businesses start up, such as a climbing gym, guide service, retail operations. But we also realize that our outdoor story is appealing to companies where the outdoors is part of their employee culture and or it's part of their corporate brand. So just this past year, both Deschutes Brewery out of Bend, Oregon, and Ballast Point Brewery out of San Diego both announced plans to build their East Coast breweries in Roanoke, and one of the key reasons why was because of our outdoor culture and our quality of life. So going forward, we recognize that talent is the future currency, and those communities that can successfully attract talent will be the ones that experience the greatest economic growth. So just this month, we hired a person with the sole job of talent attraction. And our outdoor narrative and community livability are going to be an integral part of the program that that person develops and carries forward. So to circle back and wrap things up, by focusing our efforts on educating our residents on not only how to better connect with the outdoors, but why, we've been able to show them that we truly live in a beautiful place, giving them a greater sense of pride in where they live. And the end result so far has been the creation of community cheerleaders that are out there singing the benefits of our community. And in essence, they become our biggest salespeople. They're out there convincing businesses and talent to locate here. So it's been a really fun process for us to be a part of. If this next slide comes up, it will contain my personal contact information. And so definitely feel free to reach out to me at any time with any questions. But with that, I'm going to hand it over to Micah in Stockton.
Thank you, Pete. And Micah, you should have control of the slides. Let me know if I need to change it for the first one while it transfers over.
No, I think I've got control, but thank you. Thanks, Pete. So a little bit of, Pete's kind of efforts are probably a little farther along than they are here in Stockton. So just going to talk a little bit about kind of where we're at and the process we've started to move kind of a food and agriculture focus here in Stockton, and talk about where we're at and kind of what we're going to be trying to do over the next little while here, and basically how do we got to that place and how we valued it. So just a little bit about Stockton, just to give you an idea. We're in Central Valley of California, over 300,000 people in the city. We have an economic development strategy that we approved that talks about innovation, attraction, retention, quality of life, kind of your general economic development activities. Some of our key assets are we have a port, an airport, rail access, University of the Pacific, and we have a pretty large agricultural base being in the Central Valley. We have gone through some hard times. Before Detroit, we were the largest city that had declared bankruptcy and went through the bankruptcy process. So not something I'd recommend, but it is something that we had to work through. And so that's basically where we're at, and been kind of on the road to recovery over the last few years. And part of that is focusing on economic development and the things that we could do to build up the economy to support the recovery. Just a little bit more on just the agriculture in general and kind of where we're at. So in San Joaquin County, which the city of Stockton is the largest city in San Joaquin County, we have about $2.7 billion in agriculture production from the county. Top 7 crops are almonds, milk, grapes, walnuts, cherries, cattle and calves, and tomatoes. Those all have grossed over $100 million in value in the county. So of the 1,426 square miles of the county, 88% is farms, and so pretty large farm base here and agricultural base. San Joaquin County has 11 certified farmers markets, 4 of which are in the city of Stockton, and 97 producers certified to market products at these farmers markets within the county. So despite the kind of bounty of agriculture here, we still have a pretty substantial food insecurity. We currently rank 7th out of 58 counties in the state in CalFresh participation for income eligible residents, and so we definitely have a lack of healthy individuals, and we have a pretty large underserved population as well in general. So really we're talking about a full kind of beginning to end in the agriculture. So just real quickly, so we had an economic development strategic plan done focused on food, agriculture, quality of life. Some of the core industries we have: manufacturing, food processing, and agricultural technologies. Out of that effort, we started to develop a food and agriculture action plan. It was an area where we saw a gap in the community and not a lot of effort, and we were trying to figure out what the role the city could play in those efforts. And so we started to develop that action plan, and then basically was approved in the spring of 2017, so not all that long ago. So really the purpose is to serve as a guide. The action plan is intended to create a roadmap for the coming year by focusing on priority actions that create a supportive enterprise ecosystem, strengthen communities by helping address food insecurity, and leverage the region's agricultural bounty, entrepreneurship spirit, and proximity to current efforts underway to support food and agriculture in the region as well. So going through the process, we wanted to make sure we got good public participation in going through figuring out what the gaps were and where we needed to be. So did some outreach to the community, stakeholder outreach. We included food processors and growers, urban agriculturalists, health and education advocates, government entities, transportation providers, and private businesses. Meetings were held to identify opportunities, challenges, assets, and then identify priorities and actions, providing input on the initial action plan. So really what we wanted to do is figure out where the opportunity was in the food and agriculture area, not just talking about heavy manufacturing and food production or healthy eating. So it really kind of went through all of the areas of supply chain for food, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So we got boiled down through that community process and action plan and discussions and strengths and weakness to objectives, and really fell into 6 different categories. The first being local policy. As we look at areas that we can control as the city, as the municipal service provider, and there is an area that we can control, which is local policy. And so really looked at growing urban agriculture. Local policy is creating a policy environment that supports urban agriculture. So making sure our zoning laws and zoning requirements actually lead to better fresh produce production. So the growing movement in Stockton and surrounding area provides an opportunity for both economic development and increased health by putting fresh produce into underserved communities, revitalizing blighted neighborhoods, and providing hands-on educational opportunities. So in order for urban agriculture to succeed, we must through the support of the local government, through policies and zoning ordinance that create an atmosphere where it's easy to actually do improvements and kind of lay the groundwork. The next is food insecurity. We talked a little bit about food insecurity for San Joaquin County. We have food deserts in our neighborhoods without access to healthy food. So trying to look at programs that support using existing retail outlets such as liquor stores and convenience stores and trying to figure out how to deliver more fresh produce and more local produce to those stores so that they can provide them to the community. The next is branding. Looking at branding, we have a Visit Stockton group here that focuses on outward outreach, and they actually have a new brand called Stocked Full of Flavor. So that actually lines up well with kind of local branding when it comes to food and access. And so expanding that Stocked Full of Flavor, creating a separate local brand for coordinating with others to create a regional brand for agriculture and for food access and healthy living in our community. And so we're working on that effort as well. A local regional brand can increase entrepreneurship opportunities, and we see that as an opportunity, as well as education opportunities to increase healthy eating. 4 is jobs. This really focuses on more of the industry-related activities, so really looking at preparing the workforce as skills change in the food and ag production community as technology increases, is making sure we're aligning our training groups and our schools and our education providers with the upcoming changes in the food economy. And then the next is food economy, growing value-added food manufacturing. So we do have quite a few food manufacturing facilities here in the area, and making sure we're trying to take advantage of those as we have the growing and then the production and then also the food manufacturing side, and working on skills and efforts to attract additional food economy and food production houses. And then 6 is education. Increasing educational opportunities about the value of eating fresh, local produce, including both healthy and economic benefits. So we have a needs assessment that was done in 2016. Education should be addressed as kind of a 2-prong approach of both K-12 and then working through our different education providers. So that's generally kind of the overall objectives that we're working through. A little more specifics on our action plan. So as we look at our action items, we have a total of 13 strategies and 33 actions are identified along with the lead organizations, broken down to phase 1 and phase 2 items. Phase 1 are 13 actions, basically things that we can accomplish quickly in a shorter time frame that we have some control over. Phase 2 are longer to complete, need to have additional participation from other regional players, and then longer term to implement. So some examples that we're working on: city and community work collaboratively to create an urban agriculture ordinance. So that's something we control, and what we're working on, developing a new urban agriculture local ordinance. Working with existing programs. The county has a program where they supply some fresh produce to local markets and trying to grow that opportunity. Expanding and bringing awareness to the Stocked Full of Flavor brand, and then streamlining process to provide attractive environment to food and ag manufacturing process, such as pre-certifying manufacturing equipment. So going forward, kind of looking at beginning implementation of phase 1, identifying resources, expanding the access to fresh produce and food deserts. This is kind of the lower hanging fruit, if you will, that we can actually help by adding fresh produce to our local markets and finding resources to do that. Convening a group to start the work, and we've already started this, of urban agriculture ordinance. And then holding a farm to fork event and talk about branding and Stocked Full of Flavor in the spring of 2018, where we talk about the full life cycle of food. So that's it for me. I will, I believe, hand it off to Jenny, and then talking about what they're doing. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Thanks, Micah. I don't know if I'm gonna, let's see if I can get control here. Hang on. Here we go. I'm going to talk a little bit about one of the aspects of the City of Frederick's HEAL efforts, and that's really through our shared use path and shared lane markings and complete streets policy. We have a lot of other things going on, but this is one of the things that seems to grow each year and has really gotten a lot of traction and is really one of the kind of favored projects, I guess, within the city. Just to kind of give you some perspective, this is part of our shared use path, and it goes right through the middle of downtown, and there's a creek on the other side of those trees, and then you're actually looking at some historic buildings, and then there's a library. So there's a lot of really neat access points right there on the creek. Now I lost control. Can you switch the slide for me again? Thanks. So like I said, we have the shared use path, the shared lane markings, and complete streets policy. And of course, they all impact commuters and our kids. They use them to walk to, there's 3 schools that are currently can get access from the shared use path. And the shared lane markings have an even bigger network. Those are the ones that are on the road. And then, of course, it increases our tourism because you can park and just walk or ride to a lot of the amenities in our downtown area. The shared use path has, it's 27 proposed miles of pathway, and about 12 and a half of them are completed. And our shared lane markings, we're actually not sure how many total we have right now, but as development comes through and redevelopment comes through, every time we redo a street, we'll actually put shared lane markings on it if it connects up to our entire network. And then our complete streets policy, we adopted that last year, and that was really just to kind of continue our efforts to make our area accessible to all users. You know, we want to be able to include folks with disabilities. We want to include parents with strollers, hikers, walkers, bikers, vehicles, you know, automobiles as well as buses. So we have a lot of different needs being met with that policy. And then, of course, the access to amenities. Like I said, there's really great access to schools, the library, one of the library branches, with tons of restaurants that are accessible, and then through the larger sidewalk network that we've got. It's really about providing safer routes to schools and for commuters, and we know that these are effective because we do bicycle pedestrian counts every year, and one of our longest running spots has shown that as soon as the shared use paths were installed in 2011, the usership, the bike riders jumped it doubled, and then over the last few years it's quadrupled since then. So we've had a lot of really great success just with with the shared lane markings, and that's just for cyclists. So we know that it's an effective way to work. Here's just an example. We're making some critical connections as development happens. Some of these developers are required to put in pieces of the shared use path, shared lane markings, bus access, bicycle parking. All those kinds of things are actually in our codes now. So there's a certain requirement for developers who come in and are near the path or are developing a piece that's adjacent to the path or shared lane markings. They now have to add that into their development plan, and it actually just makes their community a little bit more sellable. You know, all the units in there are going to be a little bit more sellable because they'll now be connected to all, you know, downtown as well as the west side of the city. And these critical connections, last fall we finished a connection that was a bridge tunnel, which was much needed. It goes under one of our creeks, or over one of our creeks, and under Route 15, which is the scenic highway. And it was a big undertaking, and our transportation planner worked really hard to get this completed. It links our western reaches of the city to some of our, which is where our lower income folks live, a lot of them, to our downtown amenities. Some of them actually work down there. So it gives them an alternative transportation route to those areas. our latest one that was actually just completed last week is a curb cut and directional signs at Bel Air, which is where the path actually crosses it. And we didn't have any way for wheelchairs or strollers to get across because there was no curb cut. And now we can get them across pretty easily. So that's another critical link. As a cyclist, these two links were one of the reasons that I can bike from the west side now into the city, so without being on the road very much. So I can attest to their efficiency, and I'm very thankful for it. And we do have a lot of ridership in the afternoons in particular, and very early morning. So I mentioned that there's a lot of business on the creek and in the downtown area, and the shared use path connects to all these things. So like I said, there's restaurants and the library, and there's also residential units along the creek as well as in our downtown area. And we have a lot of antique shops. We have comic book stores, we have record stores, all kinds of stuff you can think of. We even have a grocery store now. We just got that last year as well. So a lot of different amenities. And you'll see here, this is it's Carroll Creek. It's actually a fake channel. This is a flood control project, believe it or not. So it looks like a creek, but it's not really. The creek actually flows underneath it in 4 large conduits. And that's to prevent flooding in the downtown area. We had some pretty severe flooding in I believe it was the 70s. So this is one very large project to both increase economic development in this area as well as correct some flooding issues that we've had over the years. And then of course through this project we're finding other ways to meet some other goals, and one of the things is that we are a bronze level bicycle friendly community, so we're working towards silver. They changed their guidelines this last time, so we weren't able to get silver. This is our second time being a bronze level, and you can see from this picture that people will just park their bikes wherever they can, but we do have bike parking. It's just usually full, so we probably need to add a little bit more downtown for our cyclists. We also have a green corridor that runs along the shared use path, so it seems like a really great way to increase our native species and put a food forest in. We have the beginnings of a food forest that was actually accidental. It was created by Friends of Waterford Park, which is a volunteer group that has sort of taken this park under their wing. It's their neighborhood park. And they were just planting species for wildlife, really. But when I went in there, I said, do you realize this is the beginnings of a food forest? And it was kind of neat. So we're going to try to expand that up and down the creek where it's feasible. So folks can, if they want to harvest, they can, or they can just watch the wildlife harvest it. It's not going to be a permaculture garden, which seems to be what folks are leaning towards today. It'll be a true food forest, which is just trees and shrubs and brambles, things that are going to be easy for our Parks Department to maintain. And then our path, of course, helps employees reach wellness goals. So part of our HEAL resolution was actually workplace wellness. We do have a fairly robust workplace wellness program. We have a challenge going on right now, actually, where a lot of our employees are registered, and we're challenging each other to reach as many steps as we can each day. And the path actually helps us because we can just walk out of our buildings and use the path to get some of our steps in. So that's a positive point as well. When we did our HEAL resolution, we actually did the healthy eating portion. We also did, we had the shared use path and complete streets policy, and then we also had the workplace wellness. So we did all 3 of the sections of the policy when we adopted. So, and the future of HEAL in the city and beyond is really, this is where it really becomes kind of interesting to see where this is going to go. we are working with Frederick County, so we are a small municipality. We're the second largest in the state of Maryland, but when you look at us compared to the county, we're fairly small. But we're trying to work with the county and neighboring jurisdictions to connect our pathways and then eventually connect to the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal Towpath, which is a 185-mile path. And that also connects to other pathways. We've got Laurel Highlands, which is 70 miles connected to it. The Allegheny Passage is 73 miles. The Eastern Continental Divide Loop is 150. And so all of those are major for tourism. It's a really great way to get people to see Frederick. If you live in D.C., you would be able to ride the C&O up to Frederick and go visit some battlefields on the way and really get some great culture and not even have to ride on the road at all. So that's really I think our end goal here is to make all these really great connections and try to encourage people to get outside and come visit us, as well as get our own residents to and from their destinations safely. So we've been really clear on, with our developers, making sure that this is one of the priorities as it comes through the planning stages, making sure that all these things are met and that this is they understand that this is one of the city's priorities, is to make these connections and make sure that we are giving our residents and our visitors access to the amenities regardless of their income level or their abilities, just making sure that they have those opportunities. Within the city, we have Rails with Trails, and there are a couple opportunities for us to connect with that. And then, of course, like I said, the Frederick County paths. Some of the 27 miles of shared use path are actually within the county, and it's not that many, but some of them are. So we do know that we'll be connecting up with them eventually. So it's really just this network, and we've managed to put some of that responsibility on the developers, but we also have our own CIPs, capital improvement projects, where if it's a portion that the city owns, like in a park, we will put the funds towards making those improvements, like we did at Bel Air and the bridge tunnel connections. Those were both city-funded opportunities. We did get some grant funding for it, but for the most part, those were city projects because they were on city property. So that's how we're managing to fund some of these projects. I think that's the majority. I mean, we're focusing really on our exercise and making sure people get outside and have opportunities. And with that, I think that's it for us as a city.
Thank you, Jenny. These were great presentations. I'd like to thank Pete and Micah as well for their presentations today. I certainly learned a lot. And now, let's see if I can change slides. Now's the time for us to open it up for Q&A. So as I mentioned earlier, if you have a question, please type it into the question box and we will read it out loud to our speakers to have them answer it. And I think we had a couple of questions on just terms, so we can answer those first and then do some of the longer questions. So the first is actually for you, Jenny. It's what are complete street policies?
Okay, complete streets are streets designed for everyone. So they're designed for people who have disabilities. They're designed for walkers, for parents with strollers, designed for people who want to take the bus, who want to ride a bicycle, who are driving. They're really complete. They're streets for every use. And so when you make spaces for all of to meet everyone's needs, that's really where you find fewer issues with accidents. You find that your people with disabilities get around a lot easier and on their own because they're able to, because you have adequate crosswalks, you have curb cuts, you have bike lanes that are appropriately sized. and separate them from traffic. And in some cases, you would separate them from the pedestrians as well, depending kind of on the traffic flow and volume. So there's actually there's whole guidebooks on complete streets. So I encourage you to look that one up.
Thank you, Jenny. And Micah, I wanted to ask you to define CalFresh for those of us who may not be familiar with it on the East Coast.
Sure. So I'll tell you what I know. For the county here, is CalFresh is just the name of the program for the county that basically is working with existing corner markets and stores that typically don't have a lot of fresh produce, and providing basically opportunities for them, or actually buying the produce and giving it to them, to actually providing those food and the fresh produce in the corner markets or liquor stores that don't normally have it. And so it's basically providing that opportunity, and it's a program that provides that food to them. One of the things we're struggling with is they may be able to take the food, but they don't have the right infrastructure in order to keep the food fresh. And so one of the things we're looking at is a program where we're actually do some upgrades to their store in order that they can hold the fresh produce over time.
Great, thank you. And during Micah's answer, I saw a hand raised. So if that was intentional from the attendees, please do type your question into the question box and we'll answer it. So this next question is for all panelists. I think, Jenny, you started to address it a little bit at the end of your presentation, and I also heard Pete and Micah start to address this rather in different strategies that they were putting in place in Roanoke and Stockton. But we're wondering how your cities and towns have taken measures to avoid displacing low-income residents as you put into place these economic development initiatives, and if this has been an issue for you so far, or if you've heard from residents that they feel like their rent or their property taxes are spiking. And if you haven't started to address it yet, if you have any ideas about how you might in future, we'd love to hear those too.
Well, I'll jump in first, I guess. I don't in my daily thing, I don't really touch too much with that, but I can tell you that we are very much making a concerted effort to make sure that we are reaching into the underserved areas, to make sure that they are kind of coming along with us on this journey and really kind of figuring out how do we connect these underserved areas to the outdoors. So we've initiated some partnerships with like Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Boys and Girls Club, and then also some different kind of church organizations as well. So kind of leveraging our efforts by working people that are already doing that within the community, but kind of giving them a different twist on their focus. And so that's kind of what we've been doing. We haven't really seen any displacing taking place. Instead, we're trying to figure out how to better engage those different communities.
Yeah, I can answer for the city. We haven't seen displacement, but city taxes, of course, rise every year because our services cost more and more money. And that's services across the board. It's not just these kinds of projects that run up the bill. So we make an effort with all of our developments to make sure that we're trying not to displace the people where they are, and most of our new development actually occurs on farmland, so we're not really displacing anybody as of yet. If we get into redevelopment, that's when you start to really see, I think, some of that displacement and gentrification, and you will see an impact in that. So far, our larger developments are actually coming from, like I said, our farmland that's being developed, and so there isn't a displacement. I will say, yes, the city taxes have gone up, but I think that they go up for most folks, you know, as your service costs go up.
So for Stockton, you know, we have a California housing problem across the board, but the kind of conversation we're having is, and it's been brought up, is there is always that concern about displacement of individuals, and I think we're not there yet. We're not even kind of getting anywhere close, but it is something along the way that we're talking about and working with our nonprofits and our local groups who are connected to make sure we're not pricing people out of an area, or the great improvements, you know, kind of that are happening create an issue for people who are currently living there. And so it's not a problem that we've had or even started to address, but it is something that is talked about in the conversations of not only in this conversation, but just larger economic development, redevelopment conversations, making sure we're accounting for those individuals already living in an area.
Thank you for those thoughtful responses, guys. Now we are right at 3 o'clock. I know we have a few more questions that have come through the question box. So what we'll do is record those questions. We'll reach out to our panelists to get answers, and we will send out the responses to the attendees who requested additional information. I want to thank our speakers again for their fantastic presentations, for sharing their time with us today and their expertise. And I'd like to remind everyone on the webinar to please visit our Heal Cities and Towns Mid-Atlantic website to check out some additional resources on how to use HEAL, Healthy Eating, Active Living, policies and practices to advance your municipality's economic development goals. And you can read a bit more about the great work going on in Roanoke and Frederick as well. So again, I'd like to thank everyone who attended the webinar today. We will be posting the recording on our website, so if you have any friends that you know would want to see it, please help us spread the word about that recording and the slides being available online. So with that, we'll go ahead and close the webinar. Thanks again to our speakers, and I hope to hear from you all soon.